Welcome to Drumbeats, the must-listen-to podcast which explains why Indigenous partnerships are the key to securing successful outcomes in natural resource and infrastructure investment in Canada. I'm Mark Magnacca, and my co-host Rob Brant are joined today by Bill Lomax, President and CEO of First Nations Bank of Canada. Bill came back to Canada to run First Nations Bank after 20 years on Wall Street. Under his leadership, the bank's balance sheet has grown from roughly 800 million Canadian dollars to nearly 1.4 billion. In our conversation, you'll hear why the bank reports a near zero default rate, how its partnerships with 3 Canadian Crown corporations multiply lending capacity on major projects, and why Bill sees over 1.5 trillion Canadian dollars of business succession capital changing hands over the next decade. Welcome, Bill Lomax, President and CEO of First Nations Bank of Canada. And today we're at the TMX Market Centre in Toronto. Great to have you with us, Bill.
Great to be with you. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, Bill, thanks for taking the time out. I know it's a really busy week. Lots going on during FNMPC's annual conference, so appreciate you taking the time to chat.
Yeah, absolutely. It is one of the busiest events that we have all year. So, but I'm glad to be here with you.
Yes, it's very nice for us to be here as well. Can you tell us a little bit about your background, where you grew up and where you've ended up here now with us today?
Absolutely. So I grew up in northern British Columbia, Terrace, BC, which is about 45 minutes to an hour drive from my community, the Gitxsan. So I'm a member of the Gitxsan Nation, a member of the House of Luce, part of the Wolf Clan, or Luckaboo as we call, and my traditional name is Muskalois. So I grew up in northern BC until I was a teenager, moved to Vancouver with my mom, ended up doing undergrad in law school at UBC. And no offense, Rob, but I decided I didn't want to be a lawyer.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say another lawyer.
Yeah, I didn't want to be a lawyer. And so I switched careers, moved to the States and did an MBA at Columbia University. From there, I ended up working on Wall Street for about 20 more years before I came back to take over as president and CEO for First Nations Bank.
So you didn't grow up in Terrace dreaming of being a CEO of a bank.
I will tell you that when I was a kid, this is a pretty unexpected path. As a kid, only thing I knew about banks was that that's where I went to deposit a check and get some money. It certainly wasn't something on my radar as an institution that I would run. And Wall Street wasn't in my mind at all. I didn't even really know Wall Street existed until I was a fair amount older.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what brought you back to Canada after all that time?
Lots of good reasons. The usual sort of family reasons. Have teenagers that wanted them to have some Canadian experience. My wife and I are both from Canada, but the job mainly, because I'd looked at a lot of different jobs and nothing ever sort of stood out to me. But an opportunity with this bank and the opportunity to take what had been a sort of steady growth story and turn it into something much bigger was really exciting to me.
And from your background, when you were working in the States, you were also working with Indigenous peoples in the U.S. as well.
Yeah.
So do you have a perspective on where opportunity lies or what the greater challenges are? Is there differences? It's all Turtle Island.
Yes, there are certainly differences. Financially, the U.S. is far ahead of Canada for the nations down there. You've got 230 nations that have casinos, and those are, for the most part, money printing machines for them. And so that's given them a big leg up in terms of finances. And some are super successful, and others, it's more marginal. But without a doubt, running those large businesses has provided them income, provided them sources of jobs and opportunities at an earlier stage than we're seeing here. But Canada, I think, is catching up in a lot of ways. We're never going to have casinos the way they do down there. We don't have the population. Even if it was wide open to First Nations, our population compared to theirs is just not going to be the same. But our opportunity in terms of major projects, in terms of smaller projects within the Indigenous community is really a great opportunity in this country for First Nations and Indigenous communities broadly. And I think that's going to provide the impetus for us to Financially catch up is going to be hard to do, but catch up in a lot of ways.
Interesting.
Tell us a bit about First Nations Bank of Canada, Bill, that brought you back. Its history.
Well, Rob,
Stands today.
it started about 30 years ago. In fact, this is our 30th year in business. We'll be celebrating that this fall. It got started because a bunch of chiefs in Saskatchewan decided that they weren't getting the services they need from the big banks. And I think to an extent that while that's changed a bit, it still largely is true. And we're able to find ways to bring innovative capital out to First Nations and Indigenous communities. And so, the bank started off with about $5 million in 1996. And
how was it capitalized initially?
Initially, getting started, the OSFI, the regulator, would not allow the bank to start off on its own. So we had to have a sponsor. And so they did an RFP. TD Bank actually was a very good partner and stepped up and made it happen. And so we were really working with them very directly for the first about 15 or so years. Then in 2013, we separated fully from TD Bank and have been entirely on our own. So while they were one of our biggest shareholders at the beginning, they are now about a 8 or 9% shareholder in the bank still.
How is the shareholding spread at the moment? Are you
across the country?
Indigenous?
It's I think about 91% currently Indigenous owned, and that continues to grow. We have new shareholders coming online currently. We've been raising capital for about a year, and we're about to close coming up here and close ahead of our expected amount. So it's been very good.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And the shareholders are across Canada, the Indigenous.
We do have shareholders in most provinces and territories,
Right.
but not all. But we do business coast to coast to coast.
Yes. And what is it about Saskatchewan? We were talking earlier.
Yeah.
Here again, is it just that I'm born on the prairies, as I mentioned earlier.
Sure.
So is it just the cold weather means, people have to figure out how we go and survive and prosper, because it's always been a challenging place. And for many people, if they don't know how to survive.
I don't know if I know what their secret sauce is, but I can tell you that a lot of institutions have come together out of Saskatchewan. You take a look at us, you take a look at First Nations University, and some of the other institutions that come from that area. And there's absolutely been some leadership there for a long time that's really helped propel innovative thinking and a lot of good work. So I think early on there was a lot more unity among the nations, is what I've heard.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't there to sort of see it happen, but that's kind of the story that I've heard, is that there's a lot of unity among the leadership of the nations, and that helped them get through to build these institutions.
Very much so. And what do you see as the vision for the bank? You're in competition with all the existing players as well, including one of your early firms, as you mentioned, in terms of TD. How do you see that growth over the next few years?
We want to be the largest provider of financial services for Indigenous communities across the country, and we're well on that path. We're growing rapidly. I think we're the fastest growing bank in terms of commercial banking, in terms of percentage growth every year. And we, we're well poised to do a lot of great business. The nations that we serve, we're really a reflection of their successes. And there is a lot of success happening for First Nations and Indigenous communities broadly right now.
Yes.
And so that provides opportunity for us, and we're trying to find ways to get that capital out to them in ways that hasn't been done before. So we have some great partnerships that have really helped propel us. When you take a look at our Canada Infrastructure Bank deal, our Business Development Canada BDC bank deal, and we're working with EDC now. All of those are ways for us to multiply our impact on the communities that we serve.
Right. Can you tell our audience, primarily investors overseas in the UK and Europe, a little bit about those three organizations and what your arrangement is?
So all three of those are Canadian Crown corporations. Our experience with them is we sort of look at the landscape, and the big banks often see them as competition. We look at them as great partners, and we've worked with them from the start that way. And so by partnering with them, their capital comes out alongside ours to go out to the Indigenous community. So if we can lend, say, $25 million as our cap, they can potentially come in for that much and more. And so we can see the impact that we have double or more when we start looking at syndications with them and with other banks and credit unions.
So you're cooperating on due diligence and looking at sharing ideas or
correct. So
it
depends on how things are working. Sometimes they rely on our due diligence, and in some cases we work together on due diligence. But due diligence is a critical part of doing business. We're a for-profit bank, and so the business that we do has to make money. And fortunately, we've actually had one of the lowest default rates of any bank. We basically had a zero default rate.
Really?
And that's not just because we pick good deals. I like to think that we do, but the nations, they pay their bills. That's a really important message for people to understand, is that while we try to take all their credit, the reality is nations will often pay their bills even when legally they might not have to.
And where do you have an advantage serving the Indigenous nations and communities around the country that some of the other non-Indigenous banks might not be able to compete as well?
It starts from the fact that we come from the community. Over 90% of our shareholders, as I said, are Indigenous community, and our staff, we have, I think it's about 65% of our staff currently is Indigenous. Over half of our board and senior leadership is also Indigenous. So we're part of the community. We understand the community better. You might think that just makes a difference on, okay, well, we look the same. People want to do business with people who look the same. But that's not really the only thing. A big part of it is actually understanding what's important to the nations and to the communities, and being able to find innovative ways to meet those needs. And the bigger banks, take a look at the way they approve commercial credit, right? It's somebody here in Toronto who's doing that. Our team actually spends time out in the community and understands what's going on, and will have a better sense of what are real risks and what aren't.
And I'm sorry, I'm the lawyer in me. Are there structural advantages you have, things that you can do legally because you're Indigenous-owned financial institution that non-Indigenous-owned financial institutions can't do? It's just
no. I just think we're smarter. I don't. We're a Schedule I bank like all the other big banks, and so we have to follow all the same rules. We have all the same regulations. Arguably, they impact us more because we're a smaller bank, and there's while the regulators say there's proportionality, there really isn't. And so we're held to the same standards as the big banks. And so that actually is a structural impediment to us, not a structural advantage. The advantage for us is the fact that we know the community better, and have taken steps to partner where other people were afraid to.
And if we just come back to, in terms of who you're targeting in the community, what type of firms? It's primarily wholesale as opposed to individual, or
right,
just service across the board?
Right. So we focus on entrepreneurial nations and communities. While we have lending and banking services for individuals, we have about 16,000 clients across the country. Our major focus is on working with nations directly and their economic development corporations in terms of lending. And then we have a trust business that also does the same sort of work, really focused on the communities. So, the individuals, we have great partnerships, and, look at a group like NACA, who really focuses on the individual entrepreneur. We try not to play in their space, and we will, if we see a good opportunity that seems to fit for them, we'll absolutely make the referral. And they do a great job on building individual entrepreneurs. We, on the other hand, do much bigger deals and we're looking at, as I say, sort of in that $20 to $25 million cap range for our money alone, but also with the multiplier effect of bringing in other organizations, we can do far more than that.
And your assets under management, you mentioned your trust business. You've got a sizable business.
That has grown very rapidly. I think it was about 800 million when I got here. It is now about, I think about 5.4 billion.
Right.
Yeah, and again, this is the communities that are driving this, right? We see the success of the communities, and we're being part of that community. We're able to capitalize on those successes, arguably better than anybody else.
Yes.
Your equity raise that you're talking about closing soon, is that focused on Canadians only, Indigenous only, or you?
That's right.
You thought about marketing outside of Canada?
Yeah. So we have always kept open the opportunity to go outside, and we have a number of folks who are interested. But there's a great deal of demand for equity in the bank from Indigenous communities, and actually more than we need currently. So we had a goal of $50 million as our target. In about 2 weeks, we'll have hit that mark. And actually, we're going to end up exceeding that mark overall.
Oversubscribed, or are you going to take more then?
We are going to take a little bit more. And, some of that comes from some of our shareholders that are already active and wanting to do more with us. A lot of it is new nations. We're actually having to turn away quite a few nations. Unfortunately, it's a good problem to have, but we
Keep
will
wanting more.
We'll next time we do a capital raise, which hopefully is in, hopefully demand and the need will arise in 2 to 3 years. They'll be top of the list.
Wow. That's a great story and under the radar for many Canadians because they don't know about these issues and haven't been listening and watching what's really going on. What do you think about the change in the overall environment? Prime Minister Carney, they've just announced the Canada Sovereign Wealth Fund and some other changes, big focus on projects. How do you see that from your perspective with the nations and communities that you're working with?
I think this is the most exciting time to be in the business. It's one of those better lucky than smart situations where I think I arrived at a time where there is all this transformation happening.
You've got great experience like our Prime Minister.
Yeah, exactly. So, we're seeing from the federal government is really creating opportunities for nations broadly. We're going to have to work hard to keep up and make sure that we participate in the way that we should. And I think that nations are very focused on that. And the federal government and businesses will have to respect that nations may not be able to move quite as fast as they want them to. But the nations that I've talked to are very interested in seeing the advancement happen and being part of that advancement. So I think it's a really great time to be in business.
Yes. And I think that when you talk about the nations not being able to move as fast as perhaps some of the non-Indigenous companies and individuals would like, that's more because once you make a decision, you're there for 7 generations,
100%.
Right? So it's going to take a little bit more time because chiefs change, leadership changes, but the decisions don't change because they're built with the foundation of the community.
That's absolutely correct. And
which is a huge difference.
You can't just show up with what you think is a big deal and assume that the nation's going to love that and sign on to it. You have to spend some time with the community and make sure that the community broadly is on board for this project. And it's a little bit of a go slow to go fast situation. So don't show up at the last minute and think that you're going to get it done because that won't likely work. But if you're willing to engage early on, nations can move, maybe not what business would call fast, but a lot faster than I think a lot of folks would expect them to do, especially if there's a really good opportunity for them on the table.
And that's been part of our message with the London, the Canadian Indigenous Investment Summit in London to foreign investors, that trying to get the message out. There are Indigenous communities, companies, leaders who are very supportive of development, but it has to be done the right way. There has to be meaningful involvement of the Indigenous community. And when it's done that way, by and large, things can get done.
I don't think it's really any different than any other nation, right? You don't just show up coming from outside of Canada and come to Canada and say, we got a fully baked deal. This is what we're going to do, and expect the government to automatically sign off on it, right? Government's going to want to do their due diligence. You need to socialize it with the government. You got to spend time, make sure that the community wants to get it done. It's really no different.
Yes, and good business has always been built on relationships. So when you talk about, oh, you have to get to know us, and that's what we're looking for with our partners, when anybody reflects on that, actually, that's how everybody does business, right? Otherwise, it's just a transaction. And we see the effect on the world of doing transactions at the moment, as opposed to thinking, how do we make this a win-win, and how do we build something that's going to last?
Absolutely.
So, something again we found at the summit from talking to our participants with our audience, if you want somebody who knows how to compete, it's the Indigenous people, because you've had it. The system's been set up against you, right? You've always been here. You're not going anywhere. Finally, the opportunities we see here, senior leadership across the country, and it's now the time to shape this land called Canada in the way that benefits all Canadians, because what you're doing will have a benefit for all Canadians. In the UK, we've got a problem with the water system. Thames Water, and everything's a mess because we haven't been great stewards of the land and air and sea that we're responsible for. So I think this will be great for Canada. Continues to build its reputation as a great. Well, we're becoming a great place to do business now because we've changed our mindset and we're open for business again. But we'll continue to be a place that people want to come and live because the quality of life continues and improves over time. So that is really exciting.
And Bill, I'm curious, you're raising money at the moment with equity. What about the bond markets? We hear a lot about Indigenous bonds. BMO did one. Are you looking at that debt market?
Yeah, that space is not part of our mandate. It's a very important part, but we have Cedar Leaf Capital that's really been stood up quite recently, and they're very focused on that. And then we have FNFA, another great institution. These folks, we try to stick to our knitting, right? And again, like I talked about NACA, they're the kind of thing, and so we all sort of have sandboxes, if you will. But will we be part of some of the bigger deals? I think we will. But for the bonding side of things, we're going to leave that to the folks who are the experts in that field.
You've mentioned NACA a couple of times. That's the National
Aboriginal Capital Corporation.
And their focus is on Indigenous owned financial institutions across the country.
They have Indigenous financial institutions, which tend to be smaller, and they're kind of a network of them across the country. But they're small, they're local, and they are focused on the individual entrepreneur. And they do a great job of not only bringing them capital, but also helping bring them expertise, right? And I think that's the difference with Indigenous institutions generally, is we're trying to we're not here just to bring capital. We're, FNFA, Cedar Leaf, they're trying to do the same thing, and we are, of course, as well, is trying to not just be bringing the capital, but bringing our expertise and hopefully providing some support other than just capital along the way.
And for organizations that are coming into Canada the first time, besides doing their homework, corporates or investment and asset managers, what would you tell them? Here's how you need to come into the country, and where do they start?
Right. Well, look, it's not something, again, that you can just overnight figure out. If you want to come in, you make a bit of an investment. You hire some local folks. Can help you navigate the space. Somebody who really understands the business space that you're coming into, but also understands the communities that you might want to work with. And I think that can be a real help for folks. There's plenty of Indigenous consulting firms, if you will, that can help these help organizations figure out the groundwork and move into the space. So, I think if you're coming in, again, don't show up with what you think is a deal that's already done.
Right.
Come in, spend a little bit of time, engage with one of these groups that actually understands the space, and move on from there. Maybe, depending if you're already here in Canada, then start hiring people to join your team that understand the Indigenous space.
Right. And
we've delivered a similar message to the Indigenous people too, that it's a two-way street. So you need to get out. And I know capacity is an issue, and there are lots of demands on time, especially in some of the smaller communities, but it's not good enough. You need to be a little bit proactive and get out and develop those relationships.
I think that's right. I think we're looking at a time where Canada is trying to diversify its trade. As Indigenous communities, oftentimes we've been very inwardly focused, Canada focused. But there's opportunities to work with international groups to be bringing our commodities and our businesses out to international markets. And the work that you guys are doing, I think, is really great to open up that opportunity for people to learn both ways. And so, I think right now it's a great time for us as communities to start looking at how we can be playing on an international stage.
Absolutely.
Coming back to some of the sectors that we were talking about, and of course, ones all Canadians are talking about energy, mining, critical minerals, defense, infrastructure.
Yep.
What are your views on that? Do you have any insights into what's starting to move, or what do you think will be easiest?
Well, I mean, there's some very obvious pushes, right? Things like the critical minerals and mining and commodities moving along, I think, is what we'd already had in mind. I think people sort of understood that was the space.
Nice.
I think the space that is developing and going to develop fairly rapidly is the defense side of things. And I don't think a lot of the nations currently have that on the radar, maybe the way they should. There are some that are more sophisticated who are absolutely taking a look at it, moving into it, maybe well positioned already to do it. But others will look at it, and there might be some opportunities for them to move into that space now.
Yes, and that money is going to flow quicker than some of the other, because we've underinvested so years, and we're a 3-ocean country, and we don't have a very large navy, and the north is completely unprotected, right?
Absolutely.
And what about with critical minerals, for example? Everyone's critical minerals, but what about the value add? Because it's not finding the minerals. Yes, that's important, but the reason China is dominated is because they're processed.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's an important part of national security as well, right? Is being able to produce, and for our partners, right?
Yes.
To be able to provide another stream that isn't just pulling the minerals out of the ground. If all the processing has to go back to China, then that's not really doing anything for your national security. So it really has to happen.
Correct. And that's a bit coming back to Saskatchewan with uranium. Mm-hmm. Now there's discussion again.
Yep.
But Canada's never made that decision. Do we want to?
Yeah, you've got to have the scale to make it commercially sensible to do, to be refining, and maybe there's new spotlight or interest amongst allies, not just one government, but amongst reasonable.
Part of it has to be the security. Partners. You can't, if you purely base it on the market, then you're going to lose to lower cost providers like China. But if it becomes part of your national security strategy, then I think these businesses have a shot at being successful.
Yes. And but what we've seen happen with the West everything's about the market. Let the market sort out, and now we're in this spot.
Yeah.
The market's sorted out, and it's gone to, elsewhere and caused huge concerns. But a report just came out the other day about the growth of the Indigenous economy, which of course your bank benefits from because you're embedded and those are all your clients growing quicker
Absolutely.
than the non-Indigenous part of the economy. So I'm sure in Ottawa they're listening and thinking, how do we get that level of entrepreneurialism shared across the whole country?
Right. Well, I'm not sure that I have an answer for how to get everybody up to the speed that the nations are working. But I absolutely see the nations working very quickly and far more sophisticated than, say, 20 years ago in the way that they work. And so, like when I'm going across the table, people are doing incredible due diligence on investments and really looking at a wide range of opportunities. So it's, again, a pretty exciting time. One of the things I've talked about a bunch is for those, we've got, I think the number is, $1.5 trillion worth of small businesses that are going to change hands over the next 10 to 20 years, right?
Generational shift.
Yeah, so all of that is happening. And you've got all these, when you're selling your business, there's a couple of options. Your kids are going to take it over, great, but most of them don't want to. You've got the option of selling to, say, a private equity firm who will take yours, roll it up into another business. It won't look anything like what you had. Maybe half the people you had working for you are gone. It's just like, it's gone.
Yes.
A nation, on the other hand, if you give the opportunity to a nation and they're interested, they'll typically pay a fair price, keep the management, and hold that thing forever. And so if you're concerned at all about your legacy, if you built something that is meaningful to you beyond just the numbers, they can be a great partner.
Yes. And you go back and look at free trade,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's exactly what happened. All the head offices moved south and there was nothing left. Now, if the Indigenous people had their rightful share at the time, 30 years ago, we'd be in a different spot today because we wouldn't have sold. We're lucky to get the Port of Churchill back, right? That was owned by the Americans. How could anyone ever sell such a strategic port? But now it's back in Canadian hands. Mm-hmm. And coming back to just what you're talking about, the generational shift, what are you looking at in terms of talent development mm-hmm. within the bank and through the communities? Because it's how do you get the next generation ready to take these responsibilities?
So the Indigenous population is the fastest growing population in Canada. And so there's a lot of, as we age as a country, I think we're at 20% now is 65 or older. That's going to continue we're going to continue to get older as a country. We're going to need this young talent because, all of us are going to need healthcare and other things, right?
Yes.
In our long retirement years. In terms of finance, we absolutely bring in young folks and we work them from up and down the chain. So we have them in operations, we have them in sales, we have them as our tellers, we have them in senior management, like up and down our chain as an organization. We have Indigenous folks working. And I'm trying to talk to the big banks and sort of shame them a little bit to say, you have to do the same thing. If you have an Indigenous relations group, good for you, right? But if that's all you have, shame on you, right? You should have young people who are Indigenous coming into operations, somebody who's working as a stock picker in investment management, somebody who is working in compliance in all the different areas of the bank, not just as, the folks out front who are dealing with Indigenous communities, right?
Right.
You should have a lot of folks who never actually work with the Indigenous communities, not directly, right? And if you're doing that, then I think you're doing a good job. Because what happens then is those young folks will come in, they'll get experience, and they'll go back to their communities, some of them with that experience. And that just benefits the communities broadly. A lot more than just having a small team that comes out to see them.
And the country as a whole.
Correct.
Because the Indigenous peoples are Canada.
Yes.
Right? It's inseparable. So you need to spread the talent, which, as you said, you're challenging how do we refer to the other banks?
The big six.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're challenging the big six to be doing that. Is there an opportunity for your bank to be providing talent to them and directing people there? If I'm a young person starting out, and let's say I'm an in one of the Indigenous nations.
Yeah.
How do I find out about these opportunities? Are they just, they're on your website? We'll go and make a pitch for them. But, jobs are difficult to come by, right? You've got a growth business.
We don't want to be the HR unit for the big banks. Certainly, we see our top talent being tempted by them. And I think one of the advantages that we have is that we know that when we get up in the morning, we're actually doing great work for the communities. Our goal is to have the best talent in the industry. And so, if you're top sort of A type and a doer, then we'd love to have you with us. And we hope that the big banks, the other banks, will be looking for Indigenous talent as well.
Yes. And starting to develop them at every stage as opposed to just poaching your top guys.
Yeah. Well, you're here, Bill. Thanks for taking the time. I share your excitement about this moment in time. It's great to see people like you coming back from places like New York with your experience and being role models, especially in the financial sector. So thank you for all you do, Alan, and good luck with the next stage.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to spend time with both of you today.
Yes, thank you. That's been great to have you here.
Thank you to Bill Lomax for sharing his insights with us, and thank you for viewing and listening. Be sure to share, subscribe, and leave a review on your favorite podcast channel. Thanks for listening to Drumbeats. Until next time.